Hello, I'm Tony Mangino from TC2, and this is Staying Connected, where we talk about what really matters to enterprise buyers navigating today's technology and sourcing decisions. Today, we're looking at a pattern we see in almost every major technology deal: the tension between lowest cost and total value. Now, on paper, the lowest price proposal can look like the obvious win. But once you account for lifecycle cost, commercial flexibility, execution risk, and the impact on the broader roadmap, that apparent bargain can become a very expensive decision to live with. To talk about how enterprise buyers can move from a lowest cost wins mentality to a more disciplined total value approach, I'm joined by my colleague here at TC2, Larry York. Larry, welcome back.
Thanks, Tony. Always good to be here and join you.
Let's start with the basic tension. We still hear this all the time. Procurement's job is just to get the lowest price. Why does this mindset remain so persistent in large network and IT deals?
Because it's simple. Lowest price is easy to score, easy to report, and easy to explain in leadership meetings. You can point to a percentage reduction, declare savings, and move on. The problem is that the lowest upfront rate often has very little to do with the best long-term outcome. Enterprise buyers do not operate in a static environment. Requirements change, operating models evolve, suppliers change direction, and transformation programs move on their own timelines. If you optimize only for the headline price, you can easily sign up for a deal that is cheap at signature and expensive to operate.
So, Larry, what looked like a win at signature becomes a constraint for the next 3 to 5 years.
That's exactly right, Tony. And that is where a lot of organizations quietly give back the savings they thought they had achieved.
Larry, what does a cost biased procurement culture look like compared with a value oriented one?
In a cost bias culture, sourcing is judged almost entirely on price. IT and the business may help define requirements, but the scorecard is still dominated by commercials, and the headline becomes annual dollar or percent savings versus the baseline. In a value-oriented culture, price still matters. It always will, but price is evaluated alongside the things that materially impact enterprise customers: performance, resilience, implementation practicality, flexibility, governance, and the ability to support the roadmap without constant renegotiation or redesign.
So, the real shift is redefining success from did we get the lowest unit rate to did we choose the technology and commercial construct that best supports where the business needs to go?
That's exactly the shift.
One of the harder parts of this conversation is making value more tangible. Everyone agrees that agility, flexibility, and innovation matter, but they're harder to model than monthly recurring charges. How do you make that real for clients and for their finance organizations?
We usually start with scenarios rather than theory. How quickly can this solution support a new site, a new geography, or an acquisition? How hard is it to integrate a new cloud provider or SaaS platform? What happens if the business needs to change service levels, bandwidth profiles, licensing volumes, or support models midterm? You do not need a false level of precision. What you do need is a grounded way to show the direction of impact and the size of trade-off. If one option slows down strategic change, forces workarounds, or creates expensive change order behavior, that value erosion is real, even if it doesn't appear neatly on the supplier's first page pricing summary.
And treating that impact as if it is worth zero is usually where the business case breaks down.
That's right. In large enterprise deals, rigidity has a cost. It just tends to show up later and in less convenient ways.
Larry, let's talk about lifecycle modeling. When TC2 helps a client evaluate total value, what's included in the model, beyond the headline price?
We normally look at 4 categories. First, the recurring charges: access, support, software licenses, subscriptions, management, maintenance, and the obvious items everyone compares. Second, implementation and transition costs. That includes supplier non-recurring charges, dual running costs during migration, internal project effort, dependencies on other upgrades, and any credits or incentives that affect real cost of getting from the current to the future state. Third, operating costs over the term. How many people does the enterprise need to run it? How much supplier dependency are we creating? Are we locking into a support or service model that becomes difficult or expensive to change? And fourth, flexibility. This can cover a lot of ground. For example, what are commitment mechanics? What happens if the footprint changes? What rights exist around business downturn and divestiture, renewal options, termination, technology change, or restructuring? A deal can look compelling on unit rates and still become expensive if the business changes in ways that contracts don't support.
And once you put those categories into a 3 to 5 year lens, the lowest initial quote often stops looking like the best answer.
That happens quite often. It's not unusual to see the supplier with second lowest unit price win in overall economics because the platform is easier to operate, the roadmap fit is better, or the commercial terms preserve flexibility and leverage instead of constraining it.
Okay, so let's make this practical. If you want to avoid a lowest cost trap, what are the key questions you should ask before a decision gets locked in?
First, what does this option really cost over the full term once implementation support, change, activity, and renewal mechanics are included? Second, how much flexibility are we giving up if the business changes? Third, does this solution support the roadmap we actually expect to execute, or does it simply help us hit a near-term budget number? And fourth, what are we not pricing in because it is inconvenient to model, internal effort, delayed transformation, supplier friction, or the cost of unwinding a weak decision later? Those are the areas where false economies usually hide.
Larry, how do you position a higher value option with finance when year one cost is actually higher?
Tony, you have to do two things well. First, have a firm handle on the total cost of solution ownership over the term of the agreement. The model should have clear, documented assumptions and reasonable sensitivity analysis. Finance typically doesn't expect perfection, but they do expect discipline. Second, connect the recommendation directly to the business outcomes. Don't make it an abstract argument about quality. Show how the value-oriented option better aligns with the technology and sourcing roadmap, preserves leverage at renewal, reduces execution risk, or avoids paying later to undo a structurally weak decision.
Larry, before we close out, let's touch on one more issue, and that's the fear of missing out. We've both seen organizations chase the money and choose the low cost option, only to watch peers modernize faster and create a much better long term position.
That is a very real issue, but it should be framed carefully. The question is not whether a company is merely chasing near-term budget relief. The question is whether it is locking itself into a contract that will be slower, harder, more expensive to unwind while competitors move toward more flexible technologies and better commercial constructs. That is the real risk. It is not simply that you might have saved more, it's that you may later face a much larger bill to close the gap because you optimized for the wrong thing the first time.
Larry, thanks. This has been a great discussion today. And to recap, the broader point is this: enterprise buyers who create the most value are not the ones who simply win the lowest headline rate. They're the ones who negotiate for economics, contract flexibility, and strategic fit all at the same time. Larry, thanks again for joining me today.
Thank you, Tony.
And to our listeners, if you'd like to discuss how to bring a total value lens into your sourcing programs, or if you'd like to discuss other technology strategy, sourcing, and cost reduction needs with me, Larry, or any of our TC2 colleagues, please give us a call or shoot us an email. You can also stay current by subscribing to Staying Connected, by checking out our websites, and by following us on LinkedIn.